Right now, a World Cup final can pull in over 1 billion viewers. Cameras everywhere. Instant replays. A trophy lifted under fireworks. But the real story of how this all began is far stranger than the spectacle you know today. In 1930, there was no qualifying tournament at all. No months of build-up. FIFA simply sent out invitations. 13 nations said yes. That was the whole entry process. Getting to the tournament was its own ordeal. Uruguay was hosting, and Uruguay was an ocean away from most of Europe. Many top European teams refused to make the trip. England wasn't even part of FIFA at the time. Austria, Italy, Spain, and Hungary all stayed home. Only France, Belgium, Romania, and Yugoslavia crossed the Atlantic, packed onto the same ship, the Conte Verde, for a journey that took roughly 2 weeks. Imagine that. No training pitch, no proper rest, just open water and seasickness for 2 straight weeks before your first football match of a lifetime. France stepped off that boat and straight into history. On July 13, 1930, in a match against Mexico, a French forward named Lucien Laurent struck the ball into the net. It became the first goal ever scored at a World Cup. He later said he had no idea, in the moment, that anyone would remember it. Why would he? It was just a goal. Nobody had told him this tournament would become the biggest sporting event on earth. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, the host nation carried a very different kind of pressure. Uruguay hadn't just accepted an invitation. They'd built an entire stadium from nothing to prove they deserved it. The Estadio Centenario rose out of the ground in a matter of months, built specifically to mark the tournament and the country's own centennial. Construction ran so late that Uruguay's opening match had to be delayed by nearly a week. Here's where it gets strange. Substitutions didn't exist yet. If a player broke a bone mid-match, his team simply played on with 10 men. That actually happened in the American semifinal against Argentina, when a United States midfielder suffered a broken leg early in the game and had to fight through it anyway. There was no bench to turn to. No changes allowed. What you started with is what you finished with. And scoring records got messy fast. An American forward named Bert Patenaude scored 3 goals in a single match against Paraguay, the first hat-trick in World Cup history. But for decades, FIFA credited that 3rd goal to a teammate instead. It took until 2006, 76 years later, for FIFA to officially correct the record and give Patenaude his rightful place in history. By the final, on July 30th, the tension between the 2 South American giants, Uruguay and Argentina, had already boiled over into a diplomatic headache. The dispute wasn't even about tactics. It was about the ball. Argentina wanted their own ball used. Uruguay wanted theirs. FIFA President Jules Rimet had to step in personally and broker a compromise. Argentina's ball for the first half, Uruguay's for the second. Almost 93,000 fans packed into the Centenario. Argentina surged ahead 2-1 at halftime, driven by a hat-trick run from Guillermo Stabile, who would finish as the tournament's top scorer. But Uruguay came back. Pedro Chea equalized. Santos Iriarte gave the hosts the lead. And in the final minute, forward Hector Castro, a man who had lost part of his arm in a childhood accident years earlier, headed home the 4th goal to seal a 4-2 victory. Uruguay was crowned champion of a tournament nobody had ever run before. The next day became a national holiday. Across the river in Buenos Aires, a furious crowd threw stones at the Uruguayan consulate. That's how close, how personal, and how raw this new competition already felt in its very first year of existing. Jules Rimet handed over a small golden trophy that would later carry his own name. Nobody in that stadium could have known what they were actually building. Not a single match. Not a single tournament. A ritual that would eventually stop entire countries in their tracks every 4 years, for the rest of the century and beyond. So the next time you watch a packed stadium erupt over a single goal, remember what the very first version of this looked like. a boat crossing an ocean for 2 weeks, a stadium built in months, a ball argument settled by a FIFA president, and 13 teams who had no idea they were creating the most watched ritual on the planet. Because a billion-person broadcast didn't start with cameras and lights. It started with a ship, a makeshift stadium, and 13 nations simply saying yes.